Okay, how about there we go. Goodness. Every single time. I complain about this all the time. But every single time that there's an update to Streamlabs, it unsyncs my microphone. It drives me crazy. But hello and welcome to another episode of Mergedworlds, my Dungeons and Dragons story series podcast thing. What is it? Episode 111. My goodness. My goodness. I have been telling this story. Well, I've been telling this story for the vast majority of my life, but I've been telling it here on stream for several years at this point. And it's always awesome to get messages from folks who have recently found me and are going back listening to the story and catching up and such. I know there's a lot of content there to catch up on, but hopefully it's good and entertaining information and a story that you're going back to listen to. So today's won't be a huge long one today, mostly because I'm setting up a relatively long one for next time. It's falling that way. But I'm excited to continue where we left off. We'll do a brief catch up on where last episode was, and we'll jump into this one. If you'll notice beside me, I have a little plushy displacer beast. That's a Dungeons & Dragons monster, for some of you who did not know that. It was a gift from my wife for Christmas that I've had over on a different shelf. I brought him over here. I'm going to rearrange some of the stuff behind me, but I thought I'd bring him out here for a little D&D tonight, because he's one of the only D&D plushies that I have. For now. I'm sure I'll find more. So, jumping back into where we left off. So, in the story, we are currently with the same group we've been with for a while. There's a reason for that. And that is the group of Artis, Petal, Maeve, Ran, and Kip. And they're hanging out in this kingdom that is under the grip or chokehold of what is basically a cult, for lack of a better word, the Children of the Night. And things have kind of come to a head. You know, they've been there in trying to figure out what's going on and who's doing what and so on and so forth. And trying to get to the bottom of things. But it escalated at the end of last episode because one of their allies, one of the other clerics of good that are kind of in hiding and helping them in the city, their friend Tilden, the guy who first kind of saved them from trouble, had been captured and was to be publicly executed. Turn my ringer off here real quick before my phone goes off. You're playing D&D stream fundraiser. Excellent. I thought about doing something for Tabletop Weekend myself. Still in the planning stages, so I don't want to say much yet. But the Extra Life Tabletop week or 2-week period is in April. I'm thinking of putting together something for that as well. So they're working on that. They're with Tilden being captured, they realize they have to save him, and it's time to kind of bring things to a head. You'll also remember that Petal had become, for all intents and purposes, trapped inside of a wizard's house or keep or tower, whatever you want to call it. And inside was learning from the ghost of that wizard, who was also a wild mage and had made discoveries in the way wild magic works that no one had ever really put together before, and was trying to show her and share with her some of that information so that she could carry on where he left off. Even gave her a very cool magical staff that he'd created that would help tap in and funnel wild magic to be used differently than she'd tried to use it before. Instead of trying to take wild magic and contain the wild magic surges and do their best to block them off from infecting the spells, trying to find a way to take that wild magic and manipulate it into the spell itself, which could still have undesired results, but is more, I guess you'd say, effective at focusing that energy to get more likely what you want, or boost or alter a spell that exists. She was inside, and time was working differently in there, so for every day she was in there, like a week passed on the outside. So by the time this all went down, their friends had been in there, had been out running around for like 4 or 5 weeks, while she was in there 4 or 5 days. So at Tilden's public execution, lots of people there, Lots of Templars from the Children of the Night, that cult I was telling you about, are there. As well as a fair amount of city guards. I've tried to stress that the city guards very often are, I don't want to say complacent, but are under the direction to let the Children of the Night Templars handle a lot of things. So they kind of just sit back, and there's less of them in number than there are Templars for the church. But they're still technically the law, the cops of this town. There's some of them there too. And the leader of the Children of the Night is not in the city currently, the Lord of the Night. But he sent his second in command, a man named Minos. And Minos was the one who was handling the public execution. As they were preparing to do so, their other allied clerics, the ones that have been in hiding for years behind the scenes trying to help save this city, both good, neutral, and evil, made themselves aware. It popped up and were like, hey, we're clerics too. That's a good guy down there that you're about to execute, a big executioner with his big old axe. You're about to behead this dude, and it's the Children of the Night that are the problems. And of course, Minos and the Templars and Children of the Night were expecting something, right? They've been prepared for this. But that's kind of what this was. It was a way of trying to draw Artis and her friends out. Artis being a cleric, Maeve being a paladin, are just the opposites of what they want in their city, right? They don't want obvious reflections of the true gods to be popping up and doing stuff. So eventually Artis pops up as well, ripping off the fake beard she had on. And Maeve explodes out of these giant barrels of ale that was on a wagon that had appeared to have broken an axle, and they weren't able to get it out of the area, so it had to be it was surrounded by people. It was how Maeve was able to get to this place. Because remember, Maeve's a great big giant minotaur in full plate mail, right? Remember, she has full plate on. She is a paladin. Unlike her friends who have some armor, some leather, maybe some chains, so on and so forth, Artis has some padded leather. She's full plated up. And a minotaur in full shiny, because she keeps it shiny, plate mail marching through town is going to be a little obvious. So they had to find a way to get her there. And I'd led very early on in the story, I'd mentioned how they'd gotten into their hidey hole through these giant barrels at a winery. So I kind of set that up a while back. But Maeve explodes out of these barrels, and everybody starts to attack. And of course, the fighting starts. And it's at that point that a vampire, because the Children of the Night are in league with vampires. They're not all vampires. Good Lord. That many Children of the Night, they're all vampires. There's nothing that the good guys could do. But they're in league, supposedly, with vampires. Even though they hadn't seen any actual evidence of them being partnered, they did defeat a vampire out in the world before they got to the city, in this land, and technically within this kingdom. But it was also believed they were in league with them. And in case that was the case, and a vampire ends up snatching Artis and trying to basically get her out of there before she could do good to rise the people up against the Children of the Night. And as he was trying to do so, Petal appears, and whoa, she whoops him. She takes him out. Knocks him senseless at first, sends him down, and then when he attacks, she basically explodes him by ye old stake through the heart, whereas in this case, the stake was her staff, which, if you'll remember, I pointed out, is a wooden staff with what appears to be almost there's a little hair floating, a inlaid silver that would become part of the wood, had been fused inside of it. A perfect type of thing, and it comes to a silver point, a perfect type of weapon for someone who's going to fight undead, right? Silver and wooden spike. Who doesn't want some of that in their hands? But I did specifically point out that Petal was not wearing her mage robes in this situation. What she was wearing was her tough leathers, which is black leathers created by her mother and father for her, which is the same type of gear they wear because they are undead hunters. And Petal, while being a wild mage, has also been raised as a hunter, and in many ways, with her parents, has learned to use her magic to benefit that type of situation. So she's a great person to have, again, in these situations. And that's kind of where we left off. Hopefully that kind of points out everything to everybody, where we were. And that is exactly the moment where we're going to start today. And today, again, will be a relatively short episode. but important one, setting the stage very much for what's going to be coming up next. So as you can imagine, Minos, right, second in command of the Children of the Night, is up on stage. You know, he had some assassins up on step out and like going to shoot Artis and her friends, but then they were stabbed by a bunch of the city guards who were really Artis and friends' allies. Artis didn't know that was going to happen. She's not big on the assassination thing. But remember, she's running around. One of their allies is Vanessa, right? Vanessa is a cleric of Helana, goddess of death. I mean, assassins is what they do. Most assassins worship the god of death. That's just kind of how it is. It's like, a lot of times they'll give those type of prayers like, hey, here's a soul I'm giving to you. Let me live. Let me be successful in what I'm doing, and I will continue to feed you souls, kind of thing. It's kind of a trade-off. Instead of me dying in this assassination attempt, accept this soul I'm going to bring you so that I can keep bringing you more. That's good business sense right there, right? You're a goddess of death. You're like, well, I will intercede on this guy's favor because he's killing lots of people for me. So I'm okay with that. I'm gonna give him my blessing in this situation. So that's just how that works. And so, hey, look, she's like, yeah, I've got that part taken care of. And I'm sure that she did not explain to Artis and the rest of the clerics exactly how her network works, right? Because the clerics have been in hiding because technically the Children of the Night have bounties on their head for good clerics, or let me rephrase, good, neutral, or evil clerics of the true gods. They're a cult. They don't want competition, right? They've been spreading the seeds for years that those guys are all evil and the cause of the city's woes. And the Children of the Night have helped snuff them out so that it's going to be better for people, which it really isn't. Maybe a little bit in some areas, but not really. So the clerics have some people that are loyal to them, but they live regular lives. One's a blacksmith, one's a baker. And there's people that know that they're clerics and work with them. There may be a few that are technically Templars, but they don't just actively serve that, right? For example, Vanessa is the only one in the group that's technically a minor noble. So her walking around with a couple bodyguards would seem normal, right? She's a lady, she's whatever, so on. The fact, I can tell you right now, both of her bodyguards are Templars, to the goddess of death. They don't appear that way. They wear like her family crest. They don't wear anything outward that shows that. But that's exactly who she's going to want with her. And Vanessa is in a very, very odd position. When it comes to the gods and their clerics, some clerics are living on that knife's edge, right? Just balancing. Because if she fails, man, that's a goddess who has a lot of ways to kill her, right? You failed me. You're no longer doing what I need you to do. You're a liability. I have 2 Templars whose job is to protect you and or take you out if you fail me. So you know what I mean? She's like, oh, good, my bodyguards. And or assassins. So she has a larger network of people in the city just because the fact that she's a noble, she has more resources. And while her allies probably know some of that, she's still going to keep some of that to herself. Vanessa is actually, I've got backstory and things for her. And I have been looking at potential ways of providing more backstory or histories or NPC synopsis to the community for different characters that pop up and are kind of cool but are only there for a short while, for those people who'd like to hear more about certain people's stories and flesh that out. I'll be looking here in the near future to chat with the community out there and see what your thoughts on whether that's something you'd like to see. But feel free to put that in a comment somewhere. That'd be cool if it is something you'd like to see. So this all kicks off, right? Petal just took out a vampire, like ready to whoop some booty. Rand and Kip had caught up, so they're standing together. Maeve's over in the crowd, already fighting bad guys, and basically there's already fighting erupted. The people, the citizens in the middle, like the crowd, are very confused. But they're catching on, right? Like they're seeing the city guard and their clerics and Templars fighting against each other, where for years they've been allied. And these people popped up as good clerics and said, no, the Children of the Night are bad people, which a lot of people kind of had that feeling in the back of their minds anyways, but it's one of those don't rock the boats. And so these good clerics pop up and say they're going to assault an innocent man, not only an innocent man, but a man who's done nothing but strive to do good for the community. And we're not going to take that anymore. And then they see somebody, vampire, snatch this person who they know is a cleric of truth. She's quite open about that. We all knew she was in town at one point, and there's been rumors going everywhere. She's been preaching to people, causing trouble to the children of the night. She stands up, cleric of truth, and says, no, what these other clerics are saying is true. These guys are evil. Yeah, whether you like the old gods or not, it's the cleric of truth. You kind of like, it's kind of her whole job. You got to look at that. Then she gets grabbed by this vampire who's way too fast and strong for a regular person to just grab a young woman in padded armor and then start running across the courtyard with her. And then this little lady, which looks like a little elven child, because that's Petal, stabs this thing in the chest with a spiked staff, and it turns to dust. Now, right there, a lot of people seeing that are going to be like, all right, now that's what happens to vampires when you stab them in the chest. Like, that's kind of common knowledge. Stabbing vampires and garlic and things like that. That's common knowledge even in the world of, commoners, right? That's what folklore is from. Commoners know about these things. And they're like, hey, now that was a vampire. And it was attacking the girl who said she was telling the truth. That means the vampires are bad, and they're normally bad, and they're attacking these people. They must be the good people. People are putting things together. Which is not good for the children of the night. Minos, of course, seeing all this, then yells to the rest of the Templars and whoever's in the crowd, kill them all. And he doesn't mean the citizens of the town. He means Artis, her friends, and the clerics, the people that are obviously against them. And sure enough, in the crowd, certain people, start making their way towards Artis and her friends. And as they're doing it, they're pushing people out of the way who could be way bigger than them with great ease. In essence, showing that they're vampires. They're moving fast and they're moving strong, shoving people out of the way, sometimes tossing them. And so here's this wave of vampires. I mean, wave probably in around the amount of 8 to 10 vampires. Which doesn't sound like a lot. But you got to remember, a vampire very often is a boss mob in D&D. Vampires are not weaklings. Artis and her friends have attained some levels and experience. They have a bit of a head start when it comes to the magic items and artifacts they're carrying. And they've got Petal, who has excessive training in fighting things, specifically vampires, over everything else. With Draven's situation, vampires, she has all the training on them you can get. So they've got some edges that are letting them take on things that might be normally a bit above their level in a D&D kind of fight. Plus they got allies and so on and so forth. Well, these group of 10, 12, however many vampires, they're not all going at Artis and her friends. Most of them are kind of ignoring Maeve. But some of them are also going towards the other clerics that have popped up. Clear pinpoints of danger to the children of the night. That person's a target, that person's a target, Vanessa, Tilden, Sinis. These guys, the clerics. We've got to take them out too. That's who we've been trying to draw out with this entire debacle. So, of course, the crowd starts calling out vampire, right? That's vampire. Or some people misthinking demon. Either way, they're saying bad things. Vampire, demons, that's a vampire. That thing just killed a vampire. And they see more people. I think a vampire just passed me. And the crowd is starting to freak out a little bit, right? Vampires in the crowd. I don't want to be a Lunchable. I don't want to be a snack pack for a vampire. Why would I want that? These are powerful creatures. I know that. I'm not carrying any garlic with me. Oh, no. So a lot of the citizens begin to scatter, trying to flee, right? They're trying to get out of here. Well, at the same time, the vampires are moving through the crowd, and Templars that have been around this entire area, guarding the square, the town square, start trying to make their way into the crowd to get to different people and different targets and such. So people going in all sorts of directions. As the name vampire starts being called out and people start screaming, Vanessa once again speaks out loudly and begins pointing out the connection. That's correct. Those are vampires down there. Vampires. These are servants of darkness who have partnered, who are in league with the children of the night. The children of the night are not here to protect you. They intend to feed you. Feed you to these vampires. That's what they're doing. They're herding you like cattle. They've brought you to this square so you can be a feast, which is not exactly true, but it definitely gets a point across, right? Vanessa has no problem lying. She's a cleric of death. It's whatever works to attain her goals, right? She's also evil. It's like, they've brought you here to die. Defend yourselves. Rise up. The Templars are, look at them coming in there trying to feed you to the vampire. And she's instilling that panic, which, you know, can help them in their situation. It's definitely going to make it harder for things to target her if everybody's milling around her and stuff. But in the end, more people may end up dying, which, you know, she's not trying to wipe out the whole castle, but a few extra souls is a gift for a job well done. That would be a good little feather in her cap as well, right? She's got her own goals as well as everybody else. So, of course, people see this and they're like, those are vampires. The Templars are. Even the city guard are fighting them. The city guard aren't exactly sure why they're fighting them, but they see all these things happening and they're like, well, that's not good. I'm not in league with a vampire. And if they're in league with a vampire, I can't have that. I'm a cop. And so they start battling as well. And the people see the city guards are on their side. That kind of emboldens them a little bit. And so some of citizens start to fight back, start to join in with what they can get their hands on, trying to help. Sometimes just their fists, perhaps. But, you know, 20 pairs of fists against one dude with a sword is still going to be very, very effective. Right? Templars and things of that nature. Probably not the vampires as much, but at least the Templars and the people that look like they're trying to feed them to the vampires. So, Maeve sees this, right? She's out there and she's probably taking out a few Templars herself because she's a target, obviously. And she can see the vampires moving through the crowd. Remember, she's very tall, so she's kind of towering over everybody. And she can see them moving towards Artis, Petal, Ran, and Kip. And she's like, oh, gotta help my friends, right? That's what I do. And so she starts to try to head that way. But then, looking up on stage, she can see that Minos and several other Templars are now fighting against some of the city guard that were near them, as well as some people who've tried to climb up on stage and just hacking down, including the executioner who's set down his big old axe and drawn a pretty good sized sword, and they're now kind of fighting against the crowd as well, because they also still have Tilden the cleric tied up. They're going to behead the guy. He's tied up right now. And trying to decide what's going on, Maeve's like, I can't let this cleric die. And no one else can get... I'm way closer to it than Artis and they are. I'm going to have to go that way. And so Maeve corrects her trajectory and begins turning and starts making her way towards the stage. Now, as she's moving on, she's got her sword out. Remember, she uses a huge, huge two-handed sword that most people couldn't lift, you know? A full warrior might be able to pick it up and struggle with it, but Maeve can wield it one-handed or two-handed as she needs. But traditionally, she's two-handed. She does not carry a shield normally. So she's got this huge two-handed sword that she very commonly has flipped over her shoulder, kind of like you see in Final Fantasy with their big buster swords, right? Or gun blades. You know, they're so heavy they kind of have it leaning on their shoulder. They bring it down. That's a lot of her attack, is bringing it down and swooping at people. Because everybody's smaller than her, she almost uses it kind of like a scythe or sickle, if you will. So as she's making her way along, sure enough, she's pushing through and she takes out a couple Templars, but most people get out of her way. Especially the citizens, right? Because they're not quite sure what she is. She really hasn't done any talking yet, and she looks kind of scary. She is the first Minotaur many of these have ever seen. But she's also in her very bright, shiny armor, and it's well known that the Cleric of Truth has been traveling with the Minotaur, who's supposed to be a paladin. So she's shiny and stuff. She doesn't look necessarily evil in how she's dressed, and she's knocking out Templars left and right as she's walking through. So the people are just kind of getting out of her way to not bother her, because they don't know exactly what she's doing, but she's not coming after them, so they like that. Busting through the crowd, almost shooting past Maeve, Maeve just happens to catch out of the corner eye that a vampire literally is bypassing her, trying to get to Artis, going in that direction. So as she's pushing through people and people are moving out of the way, just a spot over, she sees moving through the crowd, which she believes clearly is a vampire. Again, Maeve quickly steps to the side, knocking a few people out of the way, and as the vampire's going by, because he's not flying by, he's still having to get through people. Again, these vampires, I don't even think they're going zipping through the crowd. There's still people in the way. They're just pushing people out of the way and moving much faster than the average person could. She reaches out, and as the thing is almost passed her by, she reaches out and grabs it by the back of its hair and yanks back real hard. Well, the vampire wasn't expecting that, had longer hair, as many dudes do in these type of things. Pulls it backwards. It tries to turn, and it does its vampire snarl thing, and it claws, but it's kind of tumbling backwards. She's got it. It's not off. It's kind of falling back on its heels. And with a single motion, she takes her sword and shoves it right through the thing's back. So this blade just kind of pops out of this thing's stomach, and it's snarling and screaming on the blade. And she takes her second hand and she puts it on there, and she kind of lifts it up over her head. And so this thing is, stomach, and it's just, the weight of it is just pulling it further down on the blade slowly. And it's screaming and snarling. People around see this. This is clearly noticeable. Hey, Terry. Hi, sir. It's clearly noticeable. The thing is slashing and trying to reach at Maeve. Maeve's holding it out like this. And Maeve, just kind of looking around, sees that she's not too far from a torch. She's like, all right. And so she just takes a couple steps over, and now everybody gets Templar. Anybody's not they move, and she walks just 2 or 3 feet to the side and just holds it over the fire of this big torch. And it's hot, and the blade starts to heat up, but the vampire erupts into flames and begins thrashing and screaming even more. And she's just kind of holding it there, and her hands start to get a little hot. She got plate mail on. Right, metal, and it's padding, so it's not as bad, but it's heating up for sure. And the thing, when vampires catch on fire, for those of you who didn't know this, it's just not like you normally see somebody catch on fire. Even you see a TV show or something, somebody catch on fire, they burst into flame really quick, and then they run around for a few minutes and try to jump in the water, drop and roll kind of things. Vampires, boom, it's a huge blaze almost immediately. They have to find a way to put it out in the matter of seconds because they're exceptionally flammable, regardless of pretty much what they're wearing, regardless to what Blade, the movie, and suntan lotion would imply. Right. So this thing bursts into flame, and literally after just a moment or two, it's just pieces of falling off and turning to ash. And within a minute or so, it's just completely crumbled off. And here she's standing holding a relatively sharp, very sharp, relatively warm blade that no longer has a vampire on it, just a big pile of ashes on the ground. And then putting the blade up on her shoulder, starts making her way towards the stage again. She's like, all right, there's one, now to go. So as you can imagine, by this point, alarms have been raised, right? There's going to be runners from the Templars, from the church, as well as from the city guard. So from one direction, more people are coming from the church. You can see more Templars running up the street to join in. But you also see more city guard coming to join in. An alarm has been raised that there's trouble going on. And as they show up, other city guard are like, what's going on? They're like, I don't know, but kill those guys. And they're like, okay, and doing what now there are more people coming from the church than there are coming from the city guards, from the barracks. But they still appreciate the extra help. Sorry, needed a drink. Okay. So, as I mentioned, Rand, Kip, Petal, and Artis are all together. And they're kind of at the edge of the crowd. They're not surrounded. Remember, the vampire grabbed Artis and ran a fair distance. And then Rand and Kip had to catch up, right? Had to fight through the crowd to catch up. And Petal was already there. So the four of them are together, but by this time, several Templars and a couple of the vampires are there as well. And they're fighting to keep them at bay. The Templars themselves, not too much of a problem. Many of the Templars are well trained. They're not schmucks. Like, they have training in this type of thing, but nowhere to the level of our heroes, right? Who have had excessive amounts of training. And again, as I pointed out, have gear and weapons and armor, many which are enchanted or magical. They've got the edge. The vampires, on the other hand, are a different story. I've mentioned, vampires are still vampires. They're still very hard things to fight. So they're doing everything they can to kind of keep them at bay while thinning out the Templars. The Templars, most of them, know about the vampires. So they're not trying to affect them. They're helping, but when the vampires really start to show up more in numbers, they're stepping back, saying, okay, we'll let you guys handle this. At the same time, several of the citizens, people of good nature who see the trouble and problems going on, and at this point have already said, okay, I can trust this cleric lady, I believe in what she's saying versus the Children of the Night, attempt to try to intercede on their behalf. But many of these people are not armed. They came to watch a beheading because it was kind of a you need to be here kind of thing. Social event of the year, if you will. But many of them are not well armed, so many of them have grabbed things that they can, maybe weapons from some of the people that have already fallen, Templars or city guards alike, but they're not well armed, and definitely not with gear that's going to do much damage to a vampire. So the Templars versus the city folks and city guard is kind of what we're seeing happen here. So it's a huge melee, while there's still people just trying to get out, and that's causing chaos. People who are just trying to flee and get away and not be involved. They just don't want to die. They don't want to be a vampire's midnight snack. Giving you a layout of what it looks like. Now, in this fight, the most effective person in their group at this time is Petal. Not only with Petal's training and with her new cool staff, which is very helpful, she's not acting much like a mage. She is still casting spells. She is still releasing spells here and there, as you would expect. But in many ways, she's moving more like a dancer or an acrobat. Right? Remember, she's incredibly agile. She's half Kender. And her dad, even though he's human, is very agile himself. Michael's always been that way. They're both little. One thing that brought them together. She's very quick, and she's casting her spells, and it seems odd the way that she's doing it. Artis, who's also fighting, is also keeping an eye on her friends. She's in some melee, but very often they try to keep her in the back so she can spell cast or lay out what little heal spells she has. Normally Petal's in the back too. Petal's in the forefront with Rand and Kip laying down just as big a smack as they are, if not better. And Artis sees this, and she's like, Petal's not acting like Petal normally does. She's being incredibly fast right off the bat. She's moving faster than we normally see Petal move. And Petal's already pretty quick. And she's very agile, but she's bending in ways just very oddly. She's just very much so. And when she's releasing her spells, she's doing it with minimal spell casting, right? The act of casting a spell has up to 3 different parts of a spell, right? You got your verbal, you got your somatic, and you've got your component. So you got verbal, which is you have to say something. Somatic, which is you have to use some type of hand gestures or motions. And then component, you have to have some type of spell component, whether it be a holy symbol or a bat wing or guano or whatever you want to use, a mushroom, whatever that is for that spell. Even with just verbal spells usually take a little bit, it takes a few seconds. There's quite a few words for those, but it seems like Petal's spells she's casting shorter with less words. Artis picks up on this because she's a spellcaster as well. Anybody else around would notice. But the other thing that Artis is noticing, that occasionally the magical energy, she sees her staff, right? She sees this staff she's never seen Petal have before. It's a very cool looking staff, and it's effective, obviously. But she can see that it kind of crackles with like a purple energy occasionally, almost like a little lightning zipping up and down it. And on occasion, she sees that same purple energy crackle around Petal's arms or legs or just around her body. Not harming her in any way, but almost like her body is infused with it, like her body's kind of giving off electricity. And while Artis has only a brief, minor understanding of how wild magic works, she's been friends with Petal for years, and Petal doesn't stop talking. She has an okay idea of how it works. And all she can assume is either the staff or something Petal's doing is somehow taking that wild magic and using it to, what's the word I'm looking for? Increase her own skills. She's bolstering her own skills, abilities, speed by tapping into that magic somehow. Doesn't know if it's a staff, it's a spell she cast. Does she have another magic item on her somewhere? She doesn't know, but that's what she's picking up as a magic user herself. Somehow she's tapping into magic and using it to literally affect the way that she can move and act and such. Hope that all makes sense. If not, you have a question, throw that in chat and I'll try to address it. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. But even with that all going on, they're still fighting vampires. Powerful creatures, right? So again, they're still doing their best to hold them at bay. And vampires are less likely to get worn out or tired. How long can Petal keep that up, right? Now on stage, we're going to shoot back over on stage. Minos and the Templars have been fighting off the city guard and the executioner, big old dude. Like 6'8" or something like that. Big old muscular, got the hood on still and everything. Classic executioner. Got the sleeves cut off his shirt so he can show off his arms. He's very proud of himself. I'm just saying. They're fighting off any city guards and successfully finished wiping out majority of the city guards that were on stage at the beginning and around them. And people have stopped trying to climb on stage because they're not very well armed, and people above them with swords are being way too effective. Now, behind them, Tilden is just half out of it, but he's got swollen eyes and beat up and tortured. We talked about that. He's all beat up. But he's trying to see what's going on through the one good eye that's not swollen shut, and he's very confused. Now, let me grab this here. Flip the page. Now, in this minor lull, Minos is, it's not a lull. Like, they're still fighting, but they're not being hard pressed. Now they're just kind of keeping people at bay from getting up on the stage, keeping the high ground, if you will. So they're keeping everybody down. Yells behind him to the executioner, kill the cleric, right? Let's get rid of one of them right off the bat. He's an enemy. We know this. Plus, that might bolster ours and kind of bum out the people that are fighting us. If we take one of their new little heroes out, kill him. And the executioner, who doesn't talk much, nods his head and reaches just in front of him, leaning against the side, is that big old double-bladed battle axe. Big old double-bladed one. And he picks it up, and he grabs it, and he nods to Minos. And then he turns, and he is basically a foot at most away from Maeve. And he is staring right about at her chest. Because he's a big dude. But Maeve is way bigger. Like bottom of chest. Maeve is 9.5, 10 feet tall, right? She's huge when you count the horns and everything. So he turns with his axe, and he just looks up, and he sees Maeve just looking down, snarling, unhappy. Maeve breathes very heavy when she's angry. Minotaur thing. Imagine an angry bull. It technically has that effect. He's got his axe in hand, and he tries to move quickly to pull the axe up. But Maeve is standing there with her blade and just, again, shoves it right through the dude. And again, pops out right through its back. This big double-bladed sword just slink right through the guy. He's not wearing any armor at all. And the guy just stands there for a second kind of gurgling, and the axe falls from his hand, and then he slides to the ground, just sliding right off the sword. Now, as his body hits the ground, Minos and the other Templars see this and are like, ooh, that's a problem. And Minos yells at the Templars to attack her. And they do just that. There's probably about 6 of them left on stage, and they charge all Maeve. Now, the stage isn't huge, but there's a fair amount of room, and it was built relatively sturdy. It's not something that was just built for this occasion. It's a stage that's there all the time. So it's meant to be permanent. So Maeve's not going to fall through it, and the weight of all these people running around is not going to break it or tip it over. I want to clarify that so you have an idea of the type of construction that they're on. None of those things are going to happen. So they charge in, and Maeve just literally begins cutting her way through them. Of all of them, with the exception of maybe Ran, she's the most skilled with a weapon, right? And so her sword is so big, it literally can cut through 1 or 2 people at a time, right? So she just starts cutting down Templars. She cuts down the first 3 in literally less than a minute. Their dead bodies and weapons fall to the stage, and the remaining Templars just kind of look at each other and are like, I don't think so. And they turn and literally run and jump off the edge of the stage into the crowd trying to flee. Minos is furious and yells at them to come back and defend him, which they do not. And then Minos turns and sees Maeve casually walking over to him. And he's like, ooh, that's a problem. And he turns and tries to run and jump off the stage as well. Maeve expected this, and with a little burst of speed of her own, catches up to him just as he kind of jumps in the air and grabs him by the back of his cloak, he's wearing roby cloak kind of thing, and pulls him back on, kind of grabs him and pulls and lets go, and so he hits the stage and falls. And she turns and starts walking towards him as he stumbles back up to his feet, his weapon fallen from his hands. Now, she not really having know what to do, he not knowing what to do, again tries to flee around Maeve, but her reach is so good, she literally just reaches out and grabs him by the neck. Right? Her hands almost can go all the way around the skinny dude's neck. And just lifts him off the ground. And he's reaching out, trying to claw at her face and kick and stuff. And the kicks probably hit, but they're kicking plate mail. It's not doing much, and his arms can't reach the length of hers. And Maeve just looks at him and says, "No more shall your lies poison these people." And then she just squeezes her hand real hard and twists, like just, and you can hear the neck bone just crumple under her fist, and his face just goes purple, and then she just throws him to the ground, and he's dead before he hits it. Just literally snap back, whole thing. Crushes his neck. Like an empty soda can, if I may say. "You should not have done that," a voice sounding a bit cocky said. The voice, while sounding near, also sounded far. So it's almost like she's hearing it twice. Once right next to her, and once from away. And she turns and looks into the crowd, and she sees the crowd stumbling to get out of the way as a very large man is walking towards Maeve. Maeve can see that this man is a vampire. And this vampire, clearly more powerful than the other ones that she's seen. The man has no fear, no cockiness. He's not acting animalistic or snarly. He is just straight up walking through the crowd. The few people who not getting out of his way, he's just literally tossing in the air. Even more so than Maeve could do. Maeve looks down at him and just kind of sighs, pops her neck, and hops off the stage, walking towards the guy. So this is a real big, buff vampire. But Maeve just calmly walks towards him. Well, he definitely seems more powerful, and he seems different than the others. And that's important. He seems different. Even the way he looks is a little different. Many of the vampires that they've seen could blend in easily with the crowd. They look like regular people from around here that maybe were turned into a vampire. But this guy's looks are a bit more exotic. His skin is darker, almost like it was tanned in life. Obviously, it pales up someone when he becomes a vampire. But because of that, he definitely came from a warmer, sunnier climate, almost like a golden sheen to it. And it's his skin now, even though he moves it, it almost looks like a statue moving. He seems much more powerful just in every sense of the way. Now, this fight has gone on for way too long at this point, right? This has all been going on for 10, 15, 20 minutes, all this fighting in the thing. And, battles, when they get that long, you're swinging weapons around nonstop, you get tired. Especially if you're wearing armor and you're actively fighting the whole time. A lot of these battles and sword battle stuff were decided relatively quickly. Because people can't fight all day like that. You will get tuckered out. And Artis and her friends are clearly tiring. Yet the vampires that are around them and harassing them and dodging in to strike and then backing out before they can take much of a damage are at the point where they're just almost like they're playing with them, trying to find holes in their defenses. And then as Artis is in the back watching her friends trying to figure out something to do, she sees Artis on stage popping Minos' head almost clean off. And then she can see the big dude walking and Maeve hopping down to face him. And you got to remember, both her and Artis, the detecting evil, or her and Maeve. Maeve's Maeve can sense evil even better, but that's part of her paladin stuff. She's seeking for it. She can sense it, and dude is giving it off. And Artis can see that, and she sees her friend now marching towards that. She sees her friends around her starting to falter. You see sweat all over their face and the clothes starting to get wet and stuff like that. Especially poor Petal. And those dark leathers, I've always thought, while they're good at defending undead claws and teeth, you got to get pretty sweaty in there, I would think, right? They're kind of skin tight. Do you powder up before you go in something like that? I don't know, but I'm just saying. You'd think that would be uncomfortable after a while. Now, she sees that Maeve is fighting this dude, while at the same time trying to defend. And she looks up, and Maeve and this guy are kind of fighting. And even from here, she can see Maeve's armor literally has rips across the chest. This vampire's claws have ripped, or fingernails, whatever, have ripped through the metal of the plate mail. She can't see if it hit flesh or not. It's too far away and it's still nighttime. But she can see the tears across the plate mail on Maeve's chest. And she knows that Maeve is very likely, she's alone obviously, but outclassed in this battle. From beside her, Artis hears Quintius's voice. "It is time, Artis." Artis says back to him, not verbally aloud where anyone else can hear, but remember, they can talk. She hears him. He literally can be standing there in front of her, mouth moving, talking. No one else hears him or sees his form when he has that. Only she can. But she can just think her answer and he can hear it. Although she does have a habit of speaking out loud to him without thinking about it. But in this situation, she does that and she goes, "There's still too many. It's not going to get them all." And Quintius shakes his head and says, "If not now, Artis, you may never have the chance to." With a sigh, Artis nods and then reaches and pulls Quintius from her belt. Right? She's got her weapons now, but she pulls Quintius out. Now, she begins calling upon the prayer, the words of power that Quintius has taught her in the past, that she has used. Right? Quintius is that artifact, that intelligent scepter of light, which is incredibly power and the source of all goodness and things. This is a god who made it. Right? Calls upon the power and begins speaking the words of power. As we've seen in the past, at that point, a huge column of light strikes down from basically the sky directly onto where Artis is. And this light is about 25 feet in diameter. The circle, it's round. So it's almost like a flashlight beam shining, somebody's up top, big flashlight beam coming right down on top of Artis being in the middle of it. Now this light has no effect on Artis or her friends. It's not even blinding, even though it's very bright. It just does not affect her allies that way. It does catch the notice of the crowd, and a lot of people see this huge bright light from the heavens shining down upon Artis's head. Well, she's standing there holding up this scepter and the light's coming down. Cuts to be a cool picture when you think about that, looking across the battlefield and The closest vampires that have been assaulting them get caught in it. The weakest few crumble into dust immediately, while those that were a bit stronger burn, and their skin blackens where the light hits it, and they stumble back, falling out of the light, clearly injured. Trying to, and they even tried getting a bit away, backing up at a distance there. Now, while this is going on, Maeve is still fighting in the middle. The big light, she can see it out of the corner of her eye, but she can't look over there. She knows what it is. She knows Artis can do this, and that it's something that she was going to do when they tried to get enough vampires in a close enough range to try to burn a bunch of them down. That was part of their plan to draw the vampires to her. The vampires just got a bit of a jump start quicker than they'd expected. Maeve is standing there breathing heavily, and blood flows from several wounds on her face and across her chest, where in fact he did rip through the plate mail and through some of her flesh. The vampire's claws had cut through the armor like it was just an old tattered cloth, and Maeve knew that she was clearly outmatched. All she could hope is that she could try to do as much damage as she could before she went down. Maeve attempted to try to seem like she was more injured than she truly was, moving in at him and faltering as if her leg was giving out on one side. The vampire, seeing this, moves in exceptionally fast. This is what Maeve had hoped for. And quickly, her blade, which she was holding down, she tries to bring it up, like kind of up at him, slash him across. Was her intention. And she swings with all of her strength. But the vampire was not caught unaware, and simply catches the blade in her hand, like the sharp end. And it cuts into his hand a little bit. But mind you, it's not a magical sword. This is not a magical sword that she's currently wielding. This is her regular sword of exceptional quality, which makes it harder to break. If you forget how Mergedworlds damaged weapons work, let me know and I'll cover that again. But it makes it harder to break, but it's not magical. And so while it cuts into his hand a little bit, he can ignore that. It'll heal. And he just literally catches the blade in midair. Nope, let me get back over. His fist strikes down right onto, like, because again, he's still shorter than her, right? He can't jump up and pop her on the top of the head. But he does come down real hard right on her shoulder, right on her collar. Slams her with all of his strength. And her knees buckle. And she falls to the ground. She manages to land on her knees. She falls. She doesn't fall flat. But before she can even move, he then begins to pummel down a few more times. This time, punching hard into her face and the top of her head. And starts seeing stars. You cannot defeat me, he says. The blood of the lady flows within me, for I am her chosen. Now, I want you to remember that. And point out that line specifically. The whole Children of the Night is led by the Lord of the Night, and they worship the Lady of the Night, who is supposed to be like a moon goddess. He's saying, the blood of the lady flows within me, for I am her chosen. I will kill you now, cow, and you can die knowing you have failed, knowing that I will feast on the blood of your friends. Another strike hits her hard in the forehead, and blood begins to flow down her face across one of her eyes. It's not enough, cried Artis, holding the scepter above her head, willing the strength of the light to continue. She could see Maeve as well as more vampires moving closer, but staying out of the light. These vampires are getting close, but they're not getting into the light at this point. It's obviously attracted them, and many of them have forgotten their focus on the other clerics and whatever, and are like, this is clearly the problem, we've got to get in there. Because their hope is she can't maintain it forever, which she can't. She cries out, it's not enough. It's got to be stronger, bigger. Once again, the image of Quintius appears before her, and nobody else sees it, just standing right there in front of her. At one point, Kip literally walks through him as he's defending a blow from a vampire, or from a Templar, who they have charged in to keep them at bay a bit, because the vampires can't run into the light right now. So several of the Templars have now charged in under the vampires' command, because they're going to do what the vampires tell them, and are in there trying to fight. As I said, Quintius appears before. Is there nothing else we can do? She asks. Quintus has a very serious look on his face. Yes, Artis, there is. Though I must warn you, it will come at a price. Do it, she cried. Quintius took a step towards her. Artis, you don't understand what you're asking. You need to know. Do it, Artis commanded, stronger. Her voice was stronger and filled with the power of her God. So when she's yelling this, now you're hearing her voice, but you're almost hearing like a masculine echo to it in the background, like two voices at once. And the power of it even makes Quintius stumble back a bit, as her voice is filled with the power of her God. Quintius sighs and nods, and then his image fades away. The words flowed into her mind as she began to speak in a language she did not know, a language not spoken in over 1,000 years. The light from her scepter began to pulse and grow, just as Artis herself felt the power grow inside of her, her voice growing in volume. The crowd could not help but stare, the battle pausing, the vampires nervously beginning to step away. Artis looked at them in the crowd, and when she spoke, her words were loud enough that they hurt the ears of everyone. You have heard the voice of the Lord of truth. Now you will feel his fist. The light around her faded quickly, almost like it was collapsing in upon itself until it was gone, plunging the entire city in a globe of pure darkness. So I want you to imagine the scepter is literally sucking the light into itself. So the light that was around it, the light from the torches, light from, in essence, the stars, it's like the light from every source is sucked up, leaving only everyone standing in pure darkness. For only a brief moment. Then the light once more exploded from the scepter, spreading across the town square, screaming like 1,000 banshees. Those nearest were thrown to the ground from the shockwave. The vampires, standing amongst them, incinerated instantly. The city itself, for just a moment, was brighter than on the hottest summer day, before the light once again faded, leaving behind the shock and awe of its passing. So it's a giant shockwave of light, just pure glow, goes and fades out, outside, goes through the city, and fades out as it exits beyond the border of the city. This giant wave that's screaming. Literally, it's like a siren, just screaming as the light flows. Excuse me. The large vampire had been knocked back, but had not fallen. As his vision returned, because the light was blinding to everybody this time, he found himself standing about 6 to 7 feet away from Maeve, who once again was standing herself. Her entire body glowed with a white, clean light, and the sword in her hand even more so, almost as if the blade itself was made of pure light. No longer did the blood cover her eyes, and she too spoke with the holy power of her Lord. Lies will always fall to truth, and darkness will forever be kept at bay by the light. With a snarl, the vampire hurtled towards her, with a speed only a creature of his power could achieve. But just as quickly, Maeve raised her sword and brought it down at the undead missile heading towards her. So again, she literally brings it up and down as fast as he's hurtling towards her. The blade cut into its shoulder cleanly, cutting through flesh and bone with ease. As Maeve continued her swing, the sword cut through the vampire, clearly splitting him in two, from the shoulder to the hip on the opposite side, so on an angle. As the pieces fell to the ground, and the vampire's last screams disappeared, the pieces collapsed into dust, as if the monster had been struck by the sun's rays itself. A cheer rose from the crowd around her, as Templars and the few remaining vampires began to try to fight their way to flee. Maeve looked at the fleeing monsters and raised her light-encased blade, and began walking towards them. Nearby, Artis lay on the ground, unconscious. Her skin was shrunken and pale as she lay across Rand's lap, and it looks as if she had aged quite extensively. "She's alive," said Petal, "though her pulse is very, very weak." Rand gently picked Artis up, and walking short distance away, laid her down on a bench nearby. They were outside the range of battle that was still going on in the courtyard, and they could hear the sounds of the conflict. "Go and help Maeve," said Rand. "I will keep Artis safe." Kip and Petal hesitated a moment, then nodded and quickly rushed back to the crowd. Her friend still in danger. Rand stood there, swords drawn, watching over his princess. He could see the tide had turned, and the Templars were quickly being defeated, as more and more people rallied behind Maeve. What he could not see was the image of Quintius, kneeling beside Artis. The illusion of spirit reached out to touch her cheek, but its hand passed through her. "Oh, Artis," Quintius whispered, "what have you done?" Right at 9 o'clock. My goodness. That couldn't have been timed better. Actually, it took a little longer than I expected. So at this moment, everyone, the other clerics, the people in the crowd, the city guards specifically, they see that Maeve, this glowing symbol of holiness, has just cut this huge thing in half and it turned to dust. And now she's going around helping clean up. Literally, people are rallying to her to help her in this fight. Very much as a symbol, and a very effective one at that. I can tell you that that's the end of today's episode. And the repercussions of what have just started here. Again, I must remind you, this is only the beginning still of this tale. This is an entire country that is in the grips of this cult. And its leader, the Lord of the Night, is not even in the city. This is not the end of this war that has just begun. That in itself will have incredible, dire, and permanent effect on the merged worlds for long to come. Cool. I would very much like to thank all of you for coming and listening to my story tonight and letting me share this with you. I'm very excited to continue into the next step. As I mentioned over the last several episodes, it's been a whole lot of build-up to get to the meat of this story. We are at that point now. Things are going to escalate quickly. We're going to see a lot more action and interesting things happen over the next couple of episodes as this kicks off to become a major, major event in the history of Mergeworlds. I hope you enjoyed today's story and you enjoyed the flair that kind of comes along with that. If so, please remember to click like if you're watching this on YouTube and subscribe to the channel if you're watching the video version. If you're listening this on any of the audio podcast networks, on Spotify or iTunes, it would be super, super awesome if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the podcast, give it the 5 stars and the ratings, and leave a review if you would. Definitely, people interacting with the podcast on those audio networks is what causes their algorithm to suggest it to other people. And get it in front of more eyes or ears, if you would. And that's really all I'm shooting for. I just want to share my story with as many people as possible. So thank you all for hanging with me. Awesome, but really stopping now. Yes, I am stopping now. Yes. I think this is the perfect place to stop. It's almost like a minor cliffhanger. Not really, but kind of. Thank you very much for coming and giving me the opportunity to share this story. I love it very much, and it's my favorite part of everything I get to do, to share it with you, and I couldn't do that if you guys didn't keep listening to it. So thank you very much for that opportunity. I'll be back again in 2 more weeks, 8 p.m. Friday. Every other Friday is when we do this. Come back by and hear the next section. And all the older episodes are in a playlist here on YouTube or can be found as well on iTunes and Spotify. This episode I'll have up as quickly as I can. All right. That's going to do me for this evening. I'll thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.